Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this session, I'm going to talk about William Shakespeare. Before moving with the session, subscribe the channel and share with others if you like this. William Shakespeare was born in the year 1564 and he lived up to 1616. Was an English playwright and a poet, actor. Of course, he was said to be the greatest writer in English language, the world popular dramatist, and he's also called as the national poet of England, and of course the Bard of Avon. Bard means B-A-R-D. Bard means, in Celtic culture, music composer, verse creator. Okay, so this writer, I mean, Shakespeare, his works, including, the collaborations with the writers, has completed about 39 plays and 150 sonnets and three long narrative poetries yet completed, and of course few some other verses yet completed, and his works were translated into many languages. And Shakespeare got married at the age of 18, and then his wife was about 26 years old. Actually, he started his career as an actor, and later he became a writer, and of course, and he started having his own, play company. Later, it was called as Lord Chamberlain's Men Theatre. Okay, and later, the name got changed as Kingsman Theatre. He produced most of his works, most of his popular works between 1589 and 1613. His early plays were mostly comedies and histories. After that, he started focusing on tragedies, which are like Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. So these are said to be the finest and very popular works in English language. Actually, most of his works, his plays were published in edition of varying quality and accuracy during his lifetime. But in the year 1623, John Hemmings and Henry Condell, okay, these two men were his fellow actors and friends, and they published more definitive text known as the First Folio, a posthumous collected edition of Shakespeare's dramatic works, which includes 36 of his plays. For this collection, Ben Jonson, wrote preface for this with his poem, which hails Shakespeare with the now famous epithet, which is not of an age, but for all time. And there is no clear information that when Shakespeare started writing, but the contemporary alumnus and records of performances show that several of his plays were on the London stage by year 1592. Then he was sufficiently known in London to be attacked in print by the playwright Robert Greene in his Growth's Worth of Wit. Green's attack is the earliest surviving mention of Shakespeare's work in the theatre. Biographers suggest that his career might have begun any time from the middle of 1580s to just before Green's remarks. After 1594, Shakespeare's plays were performed only by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which is a company owned by a group of players, including Shakespeare, which later became the leading play company in London. After the death of Queen Elizabeth in the year 1603, the company was awarded a royal patent by the new King James I, and changed its name as King's Men. In the year 1599, a partnership of members of the company built their own theatre on the south bank of the River Thames, which was named as Globe Theatre. In the year 1608, the partnership also took over the Blackfriars Indoor Theatre. The records of Shakespeare's, which shows property purchase and the investments, indicate that his association with the company made him a wealthy man. And in the year 1597, he bought the second largest house in Stratford, which is a new place. And in the year 1605, he invested in a share of the parish Titus in Stratford. Some of Shakespeare's dramas were published in quarto editions, started in the year 1594 and by 1598. His name became a selling point and began to appear on the title pages. He started acting in his own and other plays after his success as a playwright. The year 1616 editions of Ben Jonson's works names him on the cast list of Every Man is Humor and Sejanus is Fall. The absence of his name from the year 1605 cast list for Johnson's Valpones is taken by some scholars as a sign that his acting career was nearing its end. So, throughout his career, Shakespeare divided his time between London and Stratford. In 1596, the year before he bought new place as his family home in Stratford, Shakespeare was living in the parish of St. Helens Bishopsgate, Bishopsgate, north of the River Thames, and he moved across the river to Southwark in the year 1599. The same year, his company constructed the Globe Theatre. Nicholas Rowe, Nicholas Rowe, Nicholas Rowe, he was his first biographer who recorded the tradition repeated by Samuel Johnson that Shakespeare retired to Stratford some years before his death. Shakespeare died in the year 1616 at the age of 52. And of course, he died within a month of singing his will, which is a document which he begins by describing himself as being in perfect health. Shakespeare signed his last will and a testament uh, in 25th of March 1616. The following day, his new son-in-law, Thomas Quinney, was found guilty of fathering an illegitimate son by Margaret Wheeler, who had died during childbirth. Shakespeare was buried in the chancel of the Holy Trinity Church 2 days after his death. The epitaph carved into the stone slab covering his grave includes a curse against moving his bones, which was carefully avoided during the restoration of the church. See, most of the playwrights of the period, collaborated with the others at some point, as critics agree Shakespeare did. Mostly early, late in his career. The first recorded works of Shakespeare's are Richard III and three parts of Henry VI, written in the early 1590s during the vogue of historical drama. Shakespeare's plays are difficult to date precisely, but still, the studies of text suggest that Titus Andronicus, the Comedy of Errors, the Timing of the Shrew, and the Two Gentlemen of Verona, they might have also belonged to Shakespeare's earliest period. His first histories, which drew heavily on 1587 edition of Raphael Holinshed's Chronicle of England and Scotland and Ireland. The early plays were influenced by the works of other Elizabethan dramatists, especially Thomas Kidd and Christopher Marlowe, by the traditions of medieval drama and by the plays of Seneca. The Comedy of Errors was also based on the classical models, but no source for the timing of the shrew has been found, though it is related to a separate play of the same name and which might have derived from a folk story like the Two Gentlemen of Verona, in which two friends appear to approve of a rape. Shakespeare had contributed to the growth of English language through his dramas and sonnets, particularly through the plays. He had introduced more than 3,000 new vocabularies to the English language. In the late 19th century, Edward Dowden, who classified four of the late comedies as romances, though many scholars prefer to call them tragic comedies. Dowden's term is often used. In 1896, Frederick S. Bose, who coined the term problems plays, to describe four plays, which are all is well that ends well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, and Hamlet. The dramas, as singular in theme and temper, cannot be strictly called comedies or tragedy, which he wrote. There is no clear information that for which company Shakespeare had written his early plays. After the plagues of 1592 and 93, Shakespeare's plays were performed by his own company at the theatre and the Curtain in Shoreditch, north of the Thames. The Globe Theatre opened in autumn the year 1599 with Julius Caesar, one of the first plays staged. Most of Shakespeare's greatest post 1599 plays were written for the Globe Theatre, including Hamlet, Othello, and King Lear. And the Lord Chamberlain's men were renamed with the King's men in the year 1603. So they got a special relationship with the new King James. Though the performance records are patchy, the King's Men performed seven of Shakespeare's plays at court between the 1st November 1604 and 31st October 1605, including two performances of The Merchant of Venice. After 1608, they performed at the indoor Blackfriars Theatre during the winter and the Globe Theatre during the summer. The indoor setting combined with the Jacobean fashions for lavishly staged masks, which allowed Shakespeare to introduce more elaborate stage devices. In the year 1593 and 1594, theaters were closed. Okay, then because of plagues, theaters were closed. So Shakespeare started focusing on poems. So he published two narratives poems in the year 1593 and 94, which are on sexual themes, which are like Venus and Adonis and the rape of Lucrece. He dedicated them to Henry Wriothesley, Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton. In Venus and Adonis, an innocent Adonis rejects the sexual advices of Venus, while in the rape of Lucrece, the virtues were Lucrece is raped by the lustful Torquin, which influenced by Ovid's Metamorphoses. The poems show the guilt were often reprinted during Shakespeare's lifetime. The third narrative poem, A Love's Complaint, in which a young woman laments her seduction by a persuasive suitor. Shakespeare's first plays were written in the conventional style of the day. He wrote them in a stylized language that doesn't always spring naturally from the needs of the characters or the drama. The poetry depends on extended, sometimes elaborate metaphors and conceits, and the language is often rhetorical, written for actors to declaim rather than speak. Certainly, Shakespeare's works made a significant and lasting impression on later theatre and literature. Particularly, he expanded the dramatic potential of characterization, plot, language, and genre. Until Romeo and Juliet, for example, romance had not been viewed as a worthy topic for tragedy. Soliloquies had been used mainly to convey information about characters or events. But Shakespeare used them to explore characters' minds. His works heavily influenced later poetry. The Romantic poets attempt to revive Shakespearean verse drama, though with little success. Shakespeare influenced novelists such as Thomas Hardy, William Faulkner, and Charles Dickinson. The American novelist Herman Melville's soliloquies owe much to Shakespeare. His Captain Ahab in Moby Dick is a classic tragic hero inspired by King Lear. Scholars had identified 20,000 pieces of music linked to Shakespeare's works. These include three operas by Guy Sips, Verdi, Macbeth, Othello, and Falstaff, whose critical standing compares with that of So's plays. Shakespeare's also inspired many painters, including Romantics and pre-Raphaelites, while William Hogarth, Hogarth, William Hogarth's 1749 painting of actor David Garrick playing Richard III was decisive in establishing the genre of theatrical portraiture in Britain. In Shakespeare's days, English grammar, spelling, pronunciations were less standardized than they are now. Okay, because those time slowly the English language getting popularity. Of course, Shakespeare's language helped to shape modern English. Even Samuel Johnson, who mentioned Shakespeare frequently, and any other author in his A Dictionary of English Language, the first serious work of his type. Shakespeare's influence extends far beyond his native England and English language. His reception in Germany was particularly significant as early as the 18th century. Shakespeare was widely translated and popularized in German and gradually became a classic of a German Weimar era. Christoph Martin Wieland. Christoph Martin Wieland was the first to produce a complete translation of Shakespeare's plays. Actor and theatre director Simon Callow writes as this master, this titan, this genius, so profoundly British and so effortlessly universe. Each different culture, German, Italian, Russian, was obliged to respond to the Shakespearean example. For the most part, they embraced it with the joyous abandon and as the possibilities of language and character in action that he celebrated liberated writers across the continent. Some of most deeply affecting productions of Shakespeare have been non-English and non-European. He is that unique writer. He has something for everyone. See, according to Guinness World Records, Shakespeare remains the world's best-selling playwright, with the sales of his plays and poetry believed to have achieved in exceeds of 4 billion copies in the almost 400 years since his death. He is also the third most translated author in history. Harold Bloom wrote as Shakespeare was larger than Plato and then Saint Augustine. He includes with his fundamental perceptions. Okay, that's it about Shakespeare's. And in the upcoming lectures, I'll give lectures one by one about Shakespeare's plays. Thanks for listening my lectures. Kindly subscribe the channel.